I wasn't invited to the wedding. Not really. My name was printed on the RSVP envelope. Sure, black ink, formal serif, right next to my wife's. But everyone knew. I was there to drive the car, carry the bags, keep my mouth shut. I was the convenient adult, the one who made things happen behind the scenes, the scaffolding no one sees when the structure stands tall. I had a room at the inn, a seat at the table, but not a place in the story. Luke, my stepson, was the groom. 26. Tall, square-jawed, and always careful not to look too much like me. I paid for his braces when he was a boy. The smile he wore in every photo that weekend was something I'd bought. But he never once turned it in my direction. The wedding was just outside Savannah, on some overpolished property by the river. The kind of venue you book with a curated Pinterest board and a borrowed credit card. Oak trees draped in moss. Lanterns strung like constellations between the branches. Rows of white chairs lined up with military precision. I remember thinking it all looked artificial, beautiful, yes, but staged, curated. A performance of belonging. A rented fantasy. Fitting, I suppose. The whole weekend was a performance. I arrived early. Karen had driven down ahead of me with Luke and his fiancée, which meant I made the 6-hour trip alone, watching the sky harden through the windshield while their laughter echoed through her speakerphone. She didn't ask me to come earlier. She didn't ask if I was okay making the drive solo. She just texted me the address and said, "Don't forget the gift envelope." Of course I didn't forget. I never do. When I pulled into the gravel lot behind the main house, I recognized most of the cars. Family members from Luke's father's side. Men in loafers and pastel shirts. Women with blowouts and iced coffees. All chirping about how grown-up Luke is now, and how sweet it is that he has both his parents here. I parked in the far corner. That first evening was the welcome dinner. Open bar. White linen. A jazz trio playing polite versions of impolite songs. I carried Karen's coat, filled her wine glass, and introduced myself 36 times as Daniel, Luke's stepfather. Always with the same smile, always watching the same flicker of confusion cross their faces. You could see it, the mental sorting. Not the real dad. Not the important one. I'd been sorting myself that way for years. I just never admitted it. Luke gave a toast. He thanked his incredible mom, his friends, his fiancée's family. He said something about all the people who helped me become the man I am today. His father stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, smiling like a man who had just arrived at the finish line of a marathon he never ran. My name didn't come up. That night, after the dinner, I fixed the AC in the bridal suite. Karen had texted me while I was unloading the wine crate from the car. "The air's out in the girls' room. Can you check?" I didn't even reply. I just grabbed my toolkit and climbed the stairs. Sweat dripped down my back as I worked. The filter was so clogged I had to take the unit apart. No one thanked me. The bridesmaids barely acknowledged me when they walked in later and found the room chilled. I wasn't a guest. I was part of the staff. That's how it had always been. Years earlier, I met Luke when he was 12. Karen and I had only been dating for a few months. He wore headphones through dinner and refused to look at me. I chalked it up to grief. His dad had walked out 3 years prior, and the wound was still fresh. I was patient, quiet. I didn't try to replace anyone. I just showed up. That was my promise to Karen, back when we believed in promises. "I'll never try to be his father," I told her. "I just want to be someone he can count on." I meant it. God help me, I meant every word. For a while it worked, or I thought it did. I paid the bills, fixed the leaks, took them to doctor's appointments when Karen had meetings. I went to school events, waited in parking lots, sat through high school plays where Luke stood in the back holding a plastic sword. Every time he looked into the crowd, I waved. Every time he needed something, I was there. Stepfatherhood is a strange kind of loyalty, all the sacrifice, none of the recognition. Karen always said, "He'll come around." She said it like a prayer. Said it when I bought Luke his first car. Said it when I co-signed his apartment lease during college. Said it when he forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. He'll come around. But people don't come around. Not unless they want to. And Luke never did. 2 days before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, it finally broke. They'd set up a long table under the big oak. Candles floated in mason jars. Everyone looked sun-dazed and overfed. I was wearing the suit I had bought for the occasion. A tailored navy thing Karen helped me pick out months ago. I had ironed her dress that morning, polished her shoes, paid the caterer in full after Karen lost track of the deposit. Halfway through dinner, someone handed me a microphone. I didn't ask for it, didn't plan to speak, but I figured, why not? One moment, one small moment to say something kind. So I stood and raised my glass. I've watched Luke grow into a man with integrity, patience, and a deep love for the people in his life, I said. And while I haven't always had the words, I hope he knows how proud I am of him, how honored I've been to watch him become who he is, and how much I believe in the family he's building with Harper. I didn't cry. I didn't embarrass him. I just said the truth. Sat down. People clapped. Karen squeezed my hand. Luke gave me a nod. Then the laughter returned. Clinking glasses. Silverware scraping plates. 10 minutes later, Luke came up behind me while I was folding the gift table linens. He leaned in, quiet, and said it like he was asking me to move my car. You don't have to talk tomorrow. Just enjoy the food. You're kind of just in the way. No malice in his tone. Just dismissal. As if that one sentence wrapped up 16 years of my life in a neat little box and slid it off the table. I looked at him. I didn't speak. I just waited for the smile, the wink, the reveal that it was a joke. But there was nothing. Just his face, calm and clear. A son without a father, looking at the man who tried to be one. Karen stood 10 feet away, laughing with Harper's mother. She had heard. I saw the way her shoulders stiffened, saw her eyes flick to mine, but she said nothing, did nothing, just turned back to her conversation and let the moment rot in silence. Luke walked away. I finished folding the linens, stacked the chairs, tied up the trash bag and carried it across the gravel lot. No one noticed I was gone. Back in my room, I took off the suit and laid it gently across the chair. My knees ached. My back was tight from the drive. I poured a glass of water and sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the lawn where the string lights hummed in the trees. Music drifted through the open window. Laughter, clinking glasses, the warm pulse of a family celebration. And I wasn't in it. I had spent over a decade earning a place I would never be granted. Had paid for this wedding in more ways than one. Financially, emotionally, physically. But in the ledger of Luke's life, I was still marked as other, an accessory, polite inconvenience. That was the moment I stopped pretending. I didn't tell Karen, didn't make a scene, didn't demand an apology. I just made a silent decision. I would give them exactly what they had asked for. My absence, my silence, my removal. Not in anger, in understanding. Luke had drawn a line. Karen had let it stand. And I, fool that I was, had spent years thinking love would cross it. But love without respect is just unpaid labor. So I folded the suit, packed my bag, and left it by the door. The wedding was tomorrow. Everyone would be too busy to notice if I stood in the back. Too distracted to notice when I left. But they would notice later. They always do, when the lights go out and no one's left to fix the breaker. I didn't argue. Not with Luke. Not with Karen. Not with the silence that followed me across the lawn the morning of the wedding. When the sun rose over the river, soft and gold, and the vendors began to arrive, I dressed in silence. No suit this time. Just jeans, a button-down. I left the tie folded on the nightstand. I had worn it for them once. Now I wore only what I needed to leave. Downstairs, the house was already stirring. Harper's mother was shrieking at someone about flowers. Luke passed me on the stairwell with a garment bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't stop, didn't speak, just brushed past like I was part of the furniture. Karen was in the kitchen, hair in rollers, coffee in her hand, phone pressed to her ear. She glanced at me, eyes flitting over my clothes. "You're not dressed." I shook my head. Didn't seem necessary. She opened her mouth, but the voice on the phone demanded her attention. She turned away, nodding at nothing. That was our last conversation. I walked outside and down to the gravel lot. The sky was already heavy with heat. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck. I slid into my car and stared at the wheel, fingers resting on the ignition. I waited not for permission, not for clarity, just to feel the weight of the decision. The way silence can thicken when you know you won't be coming back. Then I turned the key and drove. No one saw me leave. No one stopped me. And as the rented house slipped into my rear view, I felt something crack. Not like a bone, but like a lock. Something old and rusted, finally breaking loose. They had made it clear. I was not family. Not really. I had been tolerated, used, leaned on. But I was never let in. Luke said it outright. Karen said it in her silence. And so I listened. I didn't drive far. Just into the city. Found a quiet cafe on a back street. The kind with cracked leather booths and a waitress who called me honey without meaning it. I sat with a coffee, untouched, and watched the world blur outside the window. The wedding would be starting soon. Guests arriving, ties adjusted, laughter rehearsed. Luke in his pressed tuxedo, Karen in her sapphire dress. I had paid for that dress. I remembered the boutique. How long she took to choose it. How she never once asked if it was too expensive. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. That was when I knew I had done the right thing. There's a line in every man. A quiet place where pride and pain converge. For years I told myself I didn't need recognition. That my love didn't need to be returned to matter. But that was a lie. Pretty one. The kind you use to justify being used. I paid for Luke's braces, his summer camps, his first car. I helped him apply to colleges. I edited his essays. I stayed up late reading scholarship applications while he slept. I took days off work to drive him to interviews. I gave him time, energy, money, and every time I thought we were building something solid, he handed the credit to someone else. To his absent father. To his mother. To himself. I was just the scaffolding. Now the building was complete, and I was no longer needed. And that, more than anything, is what broke me. Back at the venue, the celebration bloomed without me. I know because I checked the event's public tag on social media. Someone had already posted a photo of the ceremony space. Rows of white chairs, a floral arch, Luke and Harper standing under it, hands clasped. And to the side, just behind the groomsmen, stood Luke's father, smiling, radiant. No one asked where I was. It happened 2 hours later. That's when the calls began. First it was Harper's cousin, then Karen, then the planner. The first voicemail was calm. "Hey, just wondering where you ended up." The second was sharper. "Daniel, where are you? The music isn't working. Did you bring the audio drive?" Then another, "Karen's getting worried. Call me, please." I didn't answer. The truth was simple. I hadn't walked out to punish anyone. I walked out because I finally believed them. I wasn't a father. I wasn't a husband, not really. I was an extra, and extras don't get curtain calls. By evening, things started to unravel. The venue was understaffed. The caterer was 2 payments behind and refused to serve until the balance was cleared. The AV system, the one I had arranged, tested, and prepaid in part, suddenly stopped working. The speakers cut out mid-vow. The lights dimmed, flickered. A long silence filled the tent as someone fumbled with a breaker box. Then the microphone came alive. A man's voice, the venue manager I recognized, spoke through the hum of static. "We're sorry for the delay. Unfortunately, some of the services arranged for tonight have not been fully paid. We're working to resolve this. Please enjoy the refreshments in the meantime." I imagined the way Karen's face must have frozen. The way Luke looked around, confused, then angry. The crowd whispering. Guests checking their watches. The cracks forming beneath their polished little fairy tale. My phone buzzed again. Karen. Then again. This time a text. "Daniel, please. Call me. Something's wrong with the payment portal. The DJ says it was under your name?" I stared at the screen. Watched the message fade into the void of unopened things. Then I set the phone face down on the table. Let them figure it out. Let them find the thread and realize who had been holding it all along. Because it wasn't just the audio. It wasn't just the caterer or the DJ. It was everything. The tent rental, the shuttle buses, the photographer's travel stipend, all booked under my accounts. All scheduled to auto-pay the final installment on the day of the wedding. And all, earlier that morning, quietly canceled. Not out of spite, out of understanding. I had given them a fantasy, funded it, supported it, built it from the ground up. But they chose not to see me, so I chose to disappear. A few tables down, a couple clinked glasses. A child laughed. The world moved on. That's the thing about walking away, no one stops you. Not really. They only notice when the lights go out. Later, I drove back toward the house. Not to return. Just to see. I parked down the street, far enough to stay hidden. Even from that distance, I could feel the unease. The fairy lights that once sparkled now hung dull. The music had stopped again. Guests were standing in clumps, whispering. Someone was crying. The planner paced in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, frustration painted across her face. Karen stood at the edge of the lawn, her shoes in one hand, her other hand clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She was alone. Luke wasn't beside her. His father was talking to a vendor, animated, red-faced. Harper sat on the front steps, her dress pulled up at the knees, mascara streaked across her cheeks. This wasn't sabotage. This was absence. And absence has its own power. I didn't stay long. Just long enough to witness what life looks like when the foundation walks away. I drove back to the hotel. Not the one I'd booked with Karen. A new one. A single room paid in cash. I lay on the stiff mattress, arms folded across my chest, and stared at the ceiling while my phone vibrated beside me. They didn't understand it yet. Not fully. They thought it was a glitch, a hiccup, something that could be smoothed over with another check, another call. But there were no more checks, no more calls, because the man they had dismissed wasn't just a guest, wasn't just some extra body at the rehearsal dinner. He was the one who kept the lights on, the one who patched the holes and paid the debts and made sure the fantasy held. And now, for the first time, they were forced to see what the world looked like without him. No arguments. No shouts, just absence. Final, absolute. That's what respect looks like when it's withdrawn. And tomorrow, when the sun rises, they'll wake to a wedding they can't afford, a mess they can't explain, and a silence they can't repair. Because I didn't walk out in anger. I walked out in belief. They told me I wasn't part of the family. And I listened. The calls stopped the next morning. They'd come in waves the night before. First frantic, then pleading, then angry. Karen's voice had cracked by the third voicemail. Luke didn't call until nearly midnight. Just one message, clipped and cold. You've made your point. You've embarrassed everyone. I hope you're proud. I didn't listen to it twice. That morning I rose early, packed my bag in silence, checked out without breakfast. The hotel clerk barely looked up as I handed her the keycard. I watched my reflection in the lobby glass as I left. A man in borrowed clothes, leaving behind a wedding he had funded but never truly attended. Savannah was quiet in the early hours, streets slick from a late rain. The river moved slow, heavy, indifferent. I walked until the shops opened, bought coffee, sat on a bench and watched the tourists begin to fill the sidewalks. Somewhere behind me, the house would be stirring. Karen waking in a bed I paid for. Luke probably nursing a hangover. Harper, if she hadn't already gone home to her parents, would be picking glitter from her hair. And the vendors, those poor vendors, would be chasing down payments from a family that had never held the reins. Because now they knew. More than invitations had been revoked. The fantasy had been built on credit. Not financial credit, my credit. My name, my accounts, my reliability. The kind of quiet, constant presence no one thanks until it's missing. Until the lights dim. Until the music cuts out. Until someone with a clipboard asks, "Who's settling the balance?" And the room falls silent. I checked my phone. Nothing new. It would take time. Time for them to realize this wasn't temporary. That I hadn't simply stepped away in protest. I had stepped out. That every part of the celebration they took for granted had been propped up by the man they told to leave. The man they told was in the way. I had been the way. They just didn't see it. Until I was gone. By noon, I was back on the road. Northbound. The rental car full of silence and old receipts. I didn't rush. There was nothing urgent waiting for me. Just a house half filled with memories I didn't want. Furniture I'd bought. Photos I wasn't in. I stopped at a diner off the highway, the kind with chipped mugs and old men hunched over newspapers. I took a booth by the window and ordered eggs I didn't eat. My phone buzzed again. Karen. Text only this time. We need to talk. Simple. Measured. Like we were colleagues in a scheduling dispute. No, please. No, I'm sorry. Just the tired language of a woman who was used to me bending. I didn't respond. Instead, I scrolled through the bank notifications. Charges reversed. Bookings canceled. Refunds requested. One vendor had already sent a formal notice to Karen's email. I was CC'd. The subject line read, "Final invoice outstanding. Immediate action required." They'd used my name to build the dream, but signed theirs at the bottom. Now the ink was smudging, and they were looking for someone to hold the pen. But I'd already let go. That night, back in my own house, our house, though that word had started to rot, I sat in the garage. The air was stale, the light overhead flickering slightly. I opened the cabinets one by one, lined with tools, receipts, bins of Christmas decorations, and the detritus of a man who had built a life for others. I found the box of wedding paperwork, contracts, notes, the original spreadsheet Karen and I had made together. Only I'd made it. She'd watched. It listed every vendor, every deadline, every payment scheduled from my accounts. I had color-coded it, marked the ones Karen had promised to take care of, but quietly passed back to me. I saw my own handwriting in the margins. Notes I'd made after late-night phone calls with caterers, rental companies, florists. I'd done it all. Quietly, efficiently, like I always had. And when I asked nothing in return, they gave even less. Upstairs, the house was dark. Karen wasn't home. She'd stayed an extra night in Savannah, probably to smooth things over, put out fires, whisper apologies on my behalf, pretend it had all been a misunderstanding. But some fires aren't accidental. Some are set with purpose. And sometimes all you can do is let them burn. The next day, she returned. The garage door opened. Her car pulled in. I stayed seated. She saw me through the windshield and hesitated. Then she killed the engine, climbed out, and closed the door more gently than I'd ever seen her do. "Daniel." I didn't reply. She stepped closer, hands loose at her sides, shoulders slack. "You weren't at the wedding." I looked at her, not angry, just tired. "You told me I wasn't part of the family." I listened. She flinched. "I didn't say that." "No, but you didn't stop him when he did." Karen closed her eyes. The garage light buzzed overhead. "It all fell apart," she said finally. I waited. No music, no lights. The caterer demanded full payment up front. Harper's family was furious. Luke blamed me. I raised an eyebrow. "Not his father?" She shook her head. "He left halfway through. Said it wasn't his mess." A humorless laugh caught in my throat. "Sounds about right." Karen knelt beside me, not touching, just folding herself low enough to be heard. "I didn't think it would matter. I thought you'd stay, like you always do." That cut deeper than anything Luke said. Like I always do. That was my sin, wasn't it? Showing up, staying, making it easy to take me for granted. I had trained them to expect my silence, to interpret it as agreement. "I was going to say something," she whispered. "When Luke told you to be quiet, but I froze." I looked at her. You always freeze. Tears gathered, but she didn't let them fall. Karen wasn't the crying type. She rationed emotion the way others ration fuel, sparingly, reluctantly. "He's young," she said. "He didn't mean it." "No," I said. "He meant it." That's the problem. She didn't respond. I paid for that wedding, Karen. Not just with money. With years. With presents. With all the little things none of you saw. I know. No, you don't. If you did, you would have stopped him. You would have said, that man raised you. Or, he paid for your college. Or, without him, this wedding doesn't happen. But you didn't. Karen stood, pacing now, her voice rising. I was scared, Daniel. I didn't want to ruin it. I didn't want to fight the night before his wedding. So you let him erase me. Her face broke then. Just slightly. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Not anymore. Luke has no idea what's coming, I said. That wedding was just the beginning. The house he's moving into, I underwrote the loan. The car he drove down in, still in my name. His health insurance, my plan. Do you understand what happens when I remove myself? Karen didn't speak. He told me to leave, I said. So I did. Not just the dinner. The whole arrangement. I stood now, felt the weight in my knees, in my chest. I won't chase him. I won't fund him. And I won't stay in a house where silence weighs more than loyalty. She reached for me then, slow, uncertain. But I stepped back. Daniel, please. I wanted to say something kind, something final. But kindness had been extracted from me like water from stone. There was nothing left. So I walked inside, left her standing in the garage, left her with the dust, the boxes, the spreadsheet she never once opened. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. Luke, not a call, a single text. Was it really worth it? I stared at the screen. I thought of the years, the unthanked labor, the slow bleed of dignity. And I typed back, ask yourself that. I turned the phone off. Not silent mode. Off. The way you end something when there's nothing left to say. The house didn't feel empty after Karen left. That surprised me. I expected echoes. Expected the walls to feel hollow, like something had been torn out. But what settled instead was a quiet so clean it almost hurt. No tension humming in the background. No waiting for the next request, the next silent expectation. Just space. Honest space. I slept better that first night than I had in years. Not longer. Better. Morning came without dread. No list forming in my head before my eyes opened. No calculation of what needed fixing, paying, smoothing over. I made coffee and drank it hot, standing by the window, watching sunlight move across the floor like it belonged there. Karen didn't call again. Neither did Luke. That was the final lesson, I think. Once the structure collapsed, once the foundation stepped away, there was nothing left to say. No apologies strong enough. No explanation clean enough. They had lived too long in a world where my presence was guaranteed. When it wasn't, they didn't know how to reach me without asking for something. Days passed. Then weeks. I canceled the insurance policies, removed my name from the loan, transferred what was mine and closed the rest. It was astonishing how quickly a life can be dismantled when you're the one who built it. How many doors open when you stop holding them shut for others. A letter came from Luke once. Not handwritten. Typed. Formal. He wrote about stress. About embarrassment. About how the wedding got out of hand. He wrote that he never meant to hurt me, that he just wanted his day to be about him. He said families are complicated, that people say things they don't mean. He never said thank you. He never said sorry. I didn't reply, because the truth is, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires attachment. What I felt was clarity. Clean, surgical clarity. The kind that doesn't ache, just settles. I had mistaken endurance for virtue. I thought love meant absorbing damage without protest. I thought patience would eventually be rewarded. That if I stayed long enough, gave enough, asked for nothing, I would be granted a place. But places aren't granted. They're defended. And respect that has to be earned every day, from people who benefit from your silence, is not respect at all. It's convenience. I wasn't a husband to Karen. I was stability. I wasn't a father to Luke. I was funding. The moment I stopped performing those roles, they looked at me like something had malfunctioned. Like a machine that quit without permission. I see now how carefully I trained them. Every time I fixed something quietly. Every time I paid without comment. Every time I swallowed a slight and called it love. I taught them that my boundaries were flexible. That my dignity was negotiable. That my presence was unconditional. That was my mistake. Not leaving. Staying. People like to ask, why didn't you speak up sooner? As if clarity arrives on schedule. As if you wake up one day fully aware you're being erased. It doesn't happen like that. It happens slowly. In glances. In silences. In being thanked for what you provide instead of who you are. Until one day, someone tells you plainly to step aside. And you realize they've been saying it all along. I moved out a month later. Not dramatically. Just packed what was mine and left the rest where it was. Karen didn't fight it. She watched, quiet, finally understanding that there was nothing left to negotiate. She asked once, near the door, "Is there really no way back?" I looked at her and answered honestly, "No, because going back would mean pretending this never happened. And I won't disappear to make anyone comfortable again." She nodded. That was all. Now I live alone. A smaller place. Fewer rooms. Fewer ghosts. I fix only what breaks for me. I pay only for what I choose. I sit in silence without feeling accused by it. Sometimes I wonder if Luke tells people about me. If I'm a villain in his story. The man who ruined his wedding. The stepfather who walked out. Maybe I am. But I finally understand something I didn't before. You don't owe anyone your life just because they're used to spending it. Love that costs you your voice is not love. Family that survives only on your sacrifice is not family. And respect, real respect, is never free to revoke. So I ask you this, and I ask it without bitterness. If you were told, plainly and publicly, that you were in the way, if you realized too late that your silence had been mistaken for permission, if the people who depended on you never once defended you, would you have stayed? Or would you have finally walked away and let them feel the weight of your absence? Was I wrong?